Good morning, everyone. My name is Deirdre Denman, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator at EandM. Thank you for attending our webinar this morning about saving time and reducing errors on your next project with the TIA selection tool. After the presentation, we'll be doing a short Q&A. Please type any questions or comments into the Q&A box, the chat box, or you can email us at webinars@eandm.com. I'd like to introduce your presenter for this morning, Ryan Mishkin with Siemens Industry, to get us started. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Deirdre. So this is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. This is a software that I use almost on a daily basis. It's called the TIA selection tool. TIA for Siemens obviously means totally integrated automation, and that's the core focus of our technology around our automation motion control system. I am an account manager in Portland, Oregon, so I serve the Northern Oregon, Southern Washington markets, and really appreciate my partnership with EandM and having them let me host this webinar today. So without further ado, we'll get started with just a couple of slides, and then really it's going to be more of a demonstration heavy presentation today. So the TIA selection tool, what I like about it is that it is the always current configurator for the entire Siemens automation portfolio. So always current means that it's constantly being updated by the web. So when our industry mall is updated with new products, part numbers, things like that, new firmware versions, the TIA selection tool will also get a download and make sure that your parts list are always kept up to date with the TIA selection tool. So you don't have to manage offline databases. You can basically just have this application running on your desktop or on the cloud, and you can rely on Siemens to help you keep those part numbers managed for you. So I'll tell you what those mean a little bit more in a second. So this is a single tool for your whole automation design. So we don't have a separate PLC configurator and a separate HMI configurator, SCADA configurator. Everything is encompassed in this one software tool. So there is this little TIA selection tool icon on your desktop, launch it, and you can configure your whole machine or your whole factory from within inside this one software tool. What I also like is that it's always the correct configuration. If you put a PLC and its accompanying I/O modules in a project, you will never be able to leave the project without it making sure that it has every terminal block, every memory card, everything that it needs to create a correct configuration before you go to an order list. So instead of having to juggle offline spreadsheets and putting together part numbers that you think go together, this is like the double, triple, quadruple check to make sure that you always have the correct configuration. There's a number of really important wizards and filters in this tool. So we'll look at, take for a power supply, for example. You know, Siemens has a plethora of power supplies to choose from, but we have a pretty extensive and really smart wizard feature in here that kind of lets you pick a couple of features and then filter out the rest of the power supplies that don't really apply to that choice. And so it really saves you time from having to look through a bunch of things that you might not need to know. Working flexibly, this is an offline tool. So the one that I use, it's a local installation, offline, but it is connected to the internet. It will check for regular updates when you do connect to the web. So the good thing about this is that you can use it from, you know, if you're pulled over on the side of the road, as you know, some salespeople tend to do, and they need to put something together, or they're traveling in an airplane, or they're on a train and you don't have Wi-Fi, you can launch this tool right from your laptop. So that's one really nice advantage to this tool. It does have a number of different interfaces to other tools. So the TIA portal, it's our automation engineering environment. We do have a way to export this hardware configuration that you develop and design in the selection tool, and you can automatically import that into the engineering software. And then basically with all these tools, you can basically become the project engineer for your whole plant configuration. So you have the tools here to create everything that you need to, from an automation to control to power supply to switch, basically your whole entire factory configuration from one software. So you are that plant engineer. Okay, so we have two different varieties. So it's really one application. It's the TIA selection tool, but we have two different versions of it. I referenced the local version. That's the one that I prefer to use, and I'll tell you why here in a second. But we also have one that's hosted in the cloud, and there are some advantages to using it. So on the local side, there's going to be a download on the TIA selection tool site. I didn't mention this yet, but it's a free software download. So you go to the selection tool website, and you can pretty easily search that in Google. I do that all the time, just TIA selection tool. If you want to put Siemens in there as well, you can pretty easily find that from Google. Then you'll download, you'll have to install it on your PC, and you basically work locally on your PC, independent of the internet. You can save your projects either locally on your hard disk or in the cloud. So there's two different versions to save. I would say that the pros for this version is that I like to say it's a little snappier. So you're not dealing with any web latency. You're basically making changes, you're dragging, dropping. You're not having to wait on any sort of Wi-Fi bandwidth. So it's a little faster to use. And like I said earlier, you can use this anywhere, regardless of having an internet connection or not. So that's the local version. There's also the cloud-based version. It's browser-based, obviously. The cool thing about this is that it's optimized for like tablets, iPads, touch laptops, things like that. It's designed for you to drag and drop things with your fingers on an iPad. So you can basically touch one thing, drag it here. So there are some cool features with that. The pros for it is that there are no installation files, so it doesn't take up any room on your hard disk. So that's a nice feature. And that you won't ever have to download any regular software updates. So like I said earlier, with the local installation, it will not constantly, but frequently go out and check for updates, and those updates you'll have to download. With the cloud-based version, you just go into the application, and it's kept current in the cloud, so you don't have to manage those downloads or current files at all. So those are the two versions of the application. Okay, so that was a pretty brief introduction. I do want to jump really quickly into the demonstration because that's really the crux of what the tool is. I'll show some navigation of the software, what all is included in the selection tool. I'll configure just a really general automation system with some PLCs and HMIs, networking switches, power supplies, things like that. I'll show you how it has some really nice hooks to our industry online support site. So that's really our technical database for all of our products. I'll show you some cool things you can do with creations of parts lists or bill of materials. We have some really nice integrated engineering tools, so kind of hooks to other tools that would be associated with the selection tool, and then how to save and collaborate on files as well. So that's what the demonstration is going to look like. So I'm going to launch the selection tool. This is what it looks like. Again, I'm using the local version, so I save this I install this on my laptop, and I have to keep it current occasionally. This is the welcome page. From here, I can select new devices. I can look at my other projects. Right now, here's my order list. I don't have anything in the order list. Options. I'm gonna dive into that here in a second. Or project view. For those of you using TIA Portal, this should be a pretty familiar concept with portal view and project view. Portal view is sort of like your overview, and project view is more of like your engineering view. So bounce back into it really quick. Look at the options. You know, you can choose where you want to start from. You know, start from the project or portal view. Choose your languages, obviously. Where do you want your files to be saved? I should probably have that saved locally just because that's my preference. Okay, create links on the desktop. There's some online tutorials if you want to get a little bit quicker up to speed on how to use this thing. This is the installation information. This is really important. So if you think that you might not be current with your with the products that are in your database, you might want to go hit this occasionally just to verify that you do have all the latest and greatest patches for the selection tool, which means that you have all the latest part numbers, all the latest, products. If there's been a new product series release, that it's in here. So that's pretty important to check occasionally. And then feedback, you can also kind of interface with the people that make this tool. So that's, kind of make some comments there. So let's go into new device. You can see that this is really the gamut of things that you can put into your selection tool file. Your automation portfolio basically is at your fingertips. These are all the controllers you can put in. So here you see that I'm filtered on all devices, but I can filter this out a little bit. So these are my basic controllers. These are the 1200s is really what we classify those as. Our advanced controllers, 1500s, and the classic 300, 400 generation. Distributed controllers, so this is more of like your IO family of controllers. So this is ET200S based controllers. We have software based controllers, logos, on and on and on. And then you can also bounce back into the series button here. So you can see more of the overview. So here's all my IO systems. This is your IP20 stuff. This is your outside the switchboard, outside the cabinet stuff. HMI panels, there's also, quite a plethora of panels, and you can filter on those. What else do we have? PCs. So if you want to configure various PCs, you can rack PCs together, little box PCs. You see the nano boxes there. It's a pretty popular little PC. Field PGs, that's our Siemens made programming laptop where you can actually install, where you can order them with TIA Portal and all the engineering software pre-installed there. We can go back to series here. Drive technologies. So this is actually going to launch the drives technologies configurator. So you can configure G120s, V20s, S120s, things like that from here. And also Sizer is, this is another tool that will launch inside of this application. So this is where you do a lot of your motion drives. But I'm not going to launch that for a little bit. Controls, so load feeders, this is our starters basically, MSPs, contactors, link modules, things like that. What else do we got? Simicodes, those are the smart motor management tools, soft starters, the 3RWs. We also have the push button configurator, which is kind of new to me. I've never seen that in there. So a lot of controls you can put together. Software, this is where you can put together your portal software, so Step 7, WinCC, runtime software, different things like that. What else do we got? We have industrial communications, so these are your switches, your W products, so your Scalance W, your wireless security products, things like that. I'm actually going to go through and configure a couple of these here in a second. Connection systems, this is like your wiring technologies. So that's what that is. Power supplies, again, we mentioned we have a plethora of power supplies. X that out. Go back to new device. Identification stuff, so this is your RFID products. Barcode readers, these are ident communication modules, so how they actually hook up to a 1200 or 1500, handheld readers, things like that. Energy distribution, 3VA, okay, we have the molded case breakers are in here, so you can actually configure molded case circuit breakers. 3WL, so these are the power breakers that you'd see in switchgear. The pack meters, also kind of energy management for switchgear. And then these are kind of cool. These are cards for the ET200SP and the S7-1200 that also act as energy meters that'll go into those families of controllers and I/O. Internet of Things, MindSphere is a big topic for us. It's probably not the right forum to talk about MindSphere, but that's our cloud-based analytics software. There's some hardware that's accompanied with that in this, and then some other stuff. So yeah, lots of stuff that you can look around at. So without further ado, I'm going to just jump into, I like to configure 1200. This is what the configuration page looks like. You can give it a name up here. You can say what the editor is. Something down here that I like to point out is that it's important to note right off the bat if it's a standard CPU or if this is a fail-safe, an F CPU, so a safety rated controller. So let's, just for grins, put that on. You can give it a higher operating condition. So if you put it way up here in the 70C, that's going to be a C+ rated controller. So it's got a conformal coding on it. But now, so once you've made those basic configuration options, then you can now go into the configure button, the configure area. You can take a look at, okay, let's say maybe we wanted to start with this CPU. Okay, the 1200 doesn't need a memory card, so we can just say, let's go through that. And you say, oh, okay, so this is good to see here. With this type of a 1212 CPU, the selection tool knows that we only get 2 I/O modules. Okay, and we say, oh, maybe we need some more I/O, so let's jump to a 1215. Also, check this out. This one only has 1 Ethernet port, 1 Profinet port. So if we were to change that guy out, drag and drop, now you notice that I have 8 expansion modules on this guy, and I have 2 Profinet ports on it. So let's move forward with that one. Here I'm just going to put maybe I'm going to put some fail-safe digital ins on it. Put a couple relay outs, and let's look at a signal board. I'm going to put just a 1-point digital in on there. So that's the little square cavity that you're filling on the front of the S7-1200. Okay. And then if you want to get a little bit more detail on what that card looks like, let's hover over this board. So it provides you like a little blow up picture of that, of the item that you're selected on in the project tree. So I can actually look at maybe my fail-safe cards, like what does that actually look like? Okay. Let's see. So once I have like a little parts list like this, something that I like to do using the selection tool as an interface to Excel, Microsoft Excel. So I can select these guys right here. I can copy that to clipboard. I can transfer over to Excel really quick, and I can get just a real quick and dirty parts list. So I can use the selection tool as my interface to get really quick part numbers into Excel. And as a salesperson, that's sort of how I work with, bills of materials and things like that. Okay, so once I have my 1200 configured here, Maybe I want to add some, well, let me look at the limits actually. I'll show you what the limits look like. So here I can see the overall width of the system. Actually, if I go back to the thing, the configure box, I can see just quickly how wide that is versus how tall that is. It actually gives me the limits there. So I can see exactly how many digital ins I have, digital outs, analogs right there. I can see the total power loss of that system too. So when you're trying to design your power supply circuitry, so this is all factored into that. So this is a pretty helpful little window. Engineering software, so you're going to need some step 7 software to configure what you just put together. So if you don't have the engineering software, this is a nice way to apply the software directly to the hardware that you configured. So it knows that I need step 7, really version 16, but we'll work with version 15 right now. Okay, it knows that I want to do 1200 and that yes, I want to configure F CPUs, that's safety CPUs. And let's say, no, I'm not using step 7 software already. If I selected yes, that would provide me with an upgrade path or a power pack on what I select. So, okay, so I want step 7 version 15. Really, we're on version 16 now, so shame on me, I don't have my TI selection tool updated. Let's go with a download version of the software. Say I only need 1 license, and sure, I'd like to keep it up to date with a software update service on that license. So let's do a download SUS. Okay, so now it gives me step 7 basic version 15.1 download. But over here, you notice that I've got like a little red X, so something is still yet to be configured. So why don't I follow these little breadcrumbs and see what I need to find here. Step 7 safety right there is what's selected, so that's what it's pushing me towards. Let's do another download of it, and I want an SUS download for that. Okay, and here's my software list. So quantity 1 of Portal Basic, download, and then step 7 safety basic. Okay, let's now jump over to, let's add a 1500, and I'm going to, instead of using the class, or not instead, but I'm going to put an ET200 SP CPU in there. So these are actually an S7 1500 in an ET200 SP form factor. So here are all my just regular interface modules, but like I said, I want to put a CPU in there. This time I don't want to do safety CPU, so let's just do just the standard S7 1512. You can, choose a different bus adapter. So basically how your Ethernet Profinet gets attached to the CPU. You can do fiber, you can do RJ45. RJ45 is what's selected as the most common use there. You can check a different memory card size, and kind of what I like to see down here, this is kind of cool. It gives you the option to configure the Profinet stripping wire tools. So I think that's an interesting little thing there. Let's put that on. Okay, so here's our CPU, and maybe it's a little bit too big on my screen, so I can monkey around with the size there. And I'm just gonna start throwing some things on here. So here is my my base unit that it will automatically prompt me to put in there. So this white thing is the start of my potential group for the ET200SP. Put another one on there. You notice that it's black this time, so it noticed that as a forwarding of the potential group. So I'll throw a couple of those on there. Okay, maybe I want to actually put a motor starter on there. Let's put a direct starter. So this is actually a motor starter you can put on. Okay, and then say, let's see. Now, okay, I don't really know what this thing is all about. There's some little tabs down here that say, okay, let's look at there's certificates in Industry Online Support, where I can actually go to its support page. And that's the product that was highlighted there. So I get pushed into SIOS. This is our technical support database. So this is that motor starter that I was looking at, and say, okay, maybe let's look at some technical data on it. So this is kind of like its data sheet. It's loading, and I can see, give me all the data on that. I can print it, do whatever I want with it. But this is just a nice little hook to get you into the Industry Online Support. Okay. Now let's add an Ethernet switch. So let's go to Ethernet switches right there. Here it's a good place where we also have just so many Ethernet switches that it can kind of, it can sometimes be a little overwhelming. But say I know very clearly that I want an 8-port Ethernet switch that's unmanaged. Let's go with the unmanaged. And here there's still a couple, but I'm curious about this. This XB008. This is probably one of our lowest cost 8-port switches, so I'll put that in there. And then from here, let's add a power supply as well. Add a power supply. This is another one where we have quite a few power supplies. So if I know that I want a 3-phase AC power supply, let's see, also we want a 24-volt output, and we want it to be a 10-amp power supply. Oh, okay. So I have 2 to choose from. Why don't we try to compare this guy to this guy, and let's see what the differences are. So right now it's gathering some information on what those 2 look like, and it's going to put them right back to back. You'll notice there's a little germlish sprinkled in here, but here you can launch that, and actually, yeah, okay. So we'll put this in we'll put that in the project. Actually, hold on one second. Didn't want to do that. I'll put that back to 10 amps. 24 volts. Let's go ahead and add this one. So this is our brand new power supply, the 6200. So it will also go in the project. Okay. So now that we've got a couple things in our project, let's bounce over to the project view. You'll see we've got a number of different things here. And they're organized inside of this group. So if you have different groups that you'd like to organize your things into, like maybe you want to call this your S7 1500 group, and inside of this cabinet, you want to put your ET200 SP, because that's your 1500, and maybe this is that's the power supply that you wanted to put in there, or maybe you wanted to put a switch in there as well. Okay. And then also from here, maybe we forgot to put an HMI in. So let's put maybe we want a comfort panel, put a 9-inch comfort panel inside of that 1500 group. Okay, so now we can get a little bit more organization inside of our project. We call this one our S7 1200 project. Okay. What we could also do is we could start to organize things in a more of a network diagram layout. So I personally like to use this view if I'm doing a proposal for somebody. It gives you the opportunity to kind of put some networking and to put some visualization behind what you're doing. So you can connect these things up on Ethernet, take a nice little snapshot of that, and you can use that in a proposal, or if you're trying to communicate an idea to somebody, you can use that as some ideating. And then, most importantly, it's really a TIA selection tool. It's a sales tool, or it's something to configure bills of materials and to collaborate on those. So right now, the order list, the next part of this, and you see that how I had these things organized. This is my S7 1200 hierarchy. This is my S7 1500 hierarchy. So they're organized. They're organized right here. They're saying it's grouped hierarchically. I can group it only by device, so it'll filter it out by device, or it just gives me the whole raw data dump of devices here. But I like to keep them in the per group. And what I can do here is I can export this to an XLSX. I can put that somewhere on my desktop. Let's say test TIA. Okay, so it's going to export this into an Excel document. Okay, so once again, you probably have to expand your lists out a little bit, and you see how here it separated all this stuff out into, these are my, a little bit easier to see, these are my S7 1200 related parts, and these are my 1500 related parts. And so this gives you a nice list of, and remember, these are all the most current up-to-date part numbers that we have to offer. You know for a fact that these are the latest and greatest, so you don't have to worry if something's been obsolete or if there's been a new rev out there. So it just gives you a nice, easy to configure way of configuring bills of materials. If I save this file, it gets saved as a .tia file. So that's the file extension. What's nice about this is that I can now save this to my local PC. I can email this to a colleague. Maybe they want to move a few I/O modules left or right, or change, the resolution of an analog module. They can do all that kind of stuff. So you can collaborate off of one TIA file, send back and forth, and then when you're ready, you can publish that to an Excel file and then use that as a bill of material. Finally, I also promised that there's some engineering tool hooks in this as well. Why would we go through all this cool configuration if we couldn't export this to our engineering software? So I could save this to as a TIA portal importable file into our engineering environment. So that's a really nice feature, because you've done all the work to configure all this in the selection tool. Why wouldn't you want to reuse that work in more of the engineering environment when you've already had it done? So yeah, saves you on hardware configuration in your engineering environment. So jump back into the presentation here, just to summarize what we kind of saw just there to wrap it up. This is really, like I said, you save time by using always up-to-date and consistently project checking tools. Never will I forget a base unit for an ET200 SP. Never will I forget a memory card for an S7 1500. It saves me time by filtering into, the amount of Ethernet ports that a switch has that I'm looking for. I can compare different power supplies. Sometimes you might have to speak a little bit of German, but that's very rare. But it saves a lot of time. And as you saw, it's a single tool for the entire automation portfolio that we have. PLCs through power supplies. I can use this thing on an airplane, when you're sitting on a train, whatever. Maybe your internet goes out. I save a lot of time because I don't have to keep my personal parts databases up to speed. That's what Siemens does for you with this tool. You can always create the correct configuration. I don't have to worry about, oh, does this ET200 SP base unit fit with this I/O module? The software just knows it, does it for you. interfaces. It allows you to reuse work that you've already done and import that into your engineering environment, so it saves you time there. And the summation of all these steps that we just talked about really becomes or makes you become a more experienced project engineer. You can be the person from design to implementation and really shrink all that effort down and become much, much, much more efficient. So with that said, this is a tool, like I said, that I use on almost a daily basis. I think it's really easy to use. I know that it's saved me from having to double check my work all the time. In fact, this is the double check. I don't have to worry about keeping my personal databases up to snuff because it does it for me. And it's pretty easy and a useful tool. So I hope that you're all able to see some value in this as well. Once again, this is a free download, always kept up to date. So I would just Google the TIA selection tool, put a Siemens in there if you want, and it should be the top hit. Pretty easy to download, and it's pretty easy to use. So yeah, with that being said, I thank you guys. Thanks everyone out there, and I'll turn it back over to Deirdre in case there's any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, so we'll open it up for a couple of questions. Please type any questions you have into the chat or Q&A box, or you can email us at webinars@eandm.com. Let me double check to see if we have any questions. So Ryan, one question that just came up was, how do I get a login for Industry Mall?
Login for Industry Mall. So that's a little bit different, and I'm glad that you brought this up. Industry Mall is different from Industry Online Support. So Industry Online Support, anybody can get a login for. That's our technical database for, you can get parts lists, or sorry, you can get data sheets in there, certificates in there, application examples, FAQs, sample code, all that stuff is housed in Industry Online Support, or we refer to it as SIOS, S-I-O-S. Industry Mall, however, it's a separate database, it's a separate system, and that is our global pricing database. Also kept up to date with part numbers. However, that's where all the pricing is held. And in order for you to have access to it, you have to be a Siemens authorized reseller or a Siemens employee. So it would have to be a distributor. So long story short, you would have to be a Siemens authorized reseller to have IMAL access. But please sign up for SIOS. It's also just as helpful when it comes to like searching for part numbers and up-to-date part numbers and things like that.
Okay, perfect. So I don't see any other questions, Ryan. So I think that will conclude our Q&A portion of the webinar. Thank you, Ryan, and everyone who attended today. If you'd like to review any portion of this webinar, a recording will be available on our YouTube channel and on our website at EandM.com. We hope to have you again on Friday, May 29th for our webinar about IO-Link voltage monitoring. You can register for that webinar on our website at EandM.com. Thank you again and have a great Friday.